Thank you. Oh, I'm glad to be back. This is my second time here at this event, my third time in Buenos Aires this year. I love coming down here. I love this event. Mariano, who is amazing, told me yesterday, actually, when we were chatting, that the last time I came down here, I guess I had a very depressing presentation. I sort of brought the whole room down. Sorry about that. Really hope that doesn't happen again. In fact, I'm here to actually talk about something incredibly upbeat, very optimistic and forward-looking today. I'm here to talk about PressPass, but first, no, sorry, that's not there. PressPass is what I'm here to talk about. It's a project that it's right now sort of unofficially called PressPass. It's just a name that's kind of stuck in my head, and I've been obsessing about this idea now for on the mat about 6 months, and I wanted to talk about it down here, even though we haven't launched. I'm about to throw my body on that. Okay. Even though it hasn't launched yet and won't for some time, I wanted to talk about it down here because it was actually born here in a way. I was down here earlier this year for a Google event, and that's where I started actually talking about this idea with other human beings. And to my surprise and delight, people thought it was a really good idea. And so that's what I want to kind of talk to you about today. PressPass, in a nutshell, is a modest proposal. It is a network of every journalist everywhere in the world and what we can do with such a platform. But before I talk about what it is, I want to talk about what it is not. PressPass is not some kind of mega global membership organization. In fact, it's not meant to do that at all. If anything, it's meant to help journalists connect with one another and help membership organizations be more effective around the world. It's also not a global directory of every journalist on the planet. That's not at all the goal here. It is something else entirely. It's actually very simple. It's three things. It's identity, it's authentication, and entitlement. Identity, who am I? Where do I work? What membership organizations do I belong to? What have I written? Any other metadata about me that might be relevant to who I am as a journalist. Authentication, how can I prove my identity to other people in the world? How can they be sure I am who I say I am? And entitlement, based on those two things, what do I as a journalist have access to? How can I access these resources easily? And so let me talk about a little bit of the genesis of this. So another side project of mine is a platform called Document Cloud, which I hope most of you know about. If you don't, talk to me about it. Document Cloud is a tool for journalists. It's a tool to help journalists work with source documents. And I took the project back last year after not having run it for about 5 years. And we were in a crisis. We were almost out of money. And so I needed to step back and take a strategic look and say, how can we ensure that Document Cloud is around forever? And so I started looking at what are the assets that Document Cloud has. And one of the things Document Cloud has are an enormous amount of users. About 20,000 accounts globally, about 2,000 organizations. We've been around about 10 years. And that community is special. No other organization has built that sort of a community around the world. And so I started thinking, well, how can we kind of leverage that? What can we connect our users to that already isn't just about documents? And I started thinking about other things. And so you might be familiar with Quack Bots. We built this with Quartz. It's a project where it's basically a Slack bot. You can invite it into your Slack, into your team's Slack, and it does useful things for journalism. I won't talk about it much, but we built it using Document Cloud's authentication system. So if you have a Document Cloud account, you have immediate and easy access. There's no friction to include Quack Bot. And that got me thinking, that's actually a kind of a powerful idea. So I was talking to a friend of mine, Duncan Clark, who runs a wonderful startup called Flourish. You may or may not be familiar with Flourish, but it's an incredible platform for infographics and interactive content. And he's brand new, based out of London, just trying to get traction right now, just trying to get people to know what Flourish even is. And it occurred to me, well, hell, we have a bunch of users who could really use a tool like Flourish, who probably don't know about Flourish. And Flourish would love to be able to put its service in front of a bunch of users who could really use it. So I thought, well, maybe there's a way of using, again, Document Cloud's authentication to give access to third-party platforms like Flourish. And by the way, here is one of the saddest slides I've ever made in my life. If you're a journalist, there's a massive problem with discovery. How do I find out about all of these amazing tools that are available to me? You might never have heard of Flourish, or maybe you have heard of Flourish, but I can guarantee you probably haven't heard that Google has given them some money to make Flourish free for newsrooms. How would you even know this? This is a picture I took at the Global Editors Network. They had a little booth. You can see they're free for newsrooms. That's how journalists tend to discover these things. It's a little bit crazy, it's a little bit analog, and I think I have a better way of solving this. So that got me to the point where I was like, well, you know, maybe the solution here is to just take the user piece out and make it a separate thing. And that's kind of where I came to PressPass. So technically, this is a really easy thing to do. I mean, it's not easy, but this is a solved problem. This is a diagram of how OAuth works. It's basically how Google Login works. You've all probably used Google Login or something like it. You go to a website. You can log in using your credentials from Google to that website. Then there's a process where you submit your credentials. Those credentials are sent to Google. Google says, yep, this is who you think it is, and then you are authenticated on that third-party site. And there's metadata that travels with that. Sometimes that site asks you for additional information. We want your email address. We want stuff like that. So that is a process that's a known thing. It's technically very easy to do. PressPass is not a project that's going to be hard on the technical side. It's going to be hard on the human side. It's going to be hard getting people, and especially publishers, involved. And this is where I need your help. So a little plug ski right now. I'll be doing a very short, it'll be almost, we'll call it a workshop, but it's more probably, we'll call it a group brainstorm about how we might take PressPass and make it into the thing that, the vision that I'm talking about right now, this global network of journalists. And this is how it might work if you're a membership organization or if you're the New York Times or some other publisher. Let's say the New York Times wants to give its staff access to a bunch of third-party platforms, Quack Bots, Flourish, Document Cloud, Harken. Right now, each of those organizations maintains its own user management and authentication systems. You have to have a password for each one. There's no easy way to integrate all of those four things. And there's certainly no easy way for the New York Times to say, hey, I want to bundle those together and give my staff easy access to that. Using PressPass, easy peasy. That's the entitlement piece. You're a New York Times reporter. We've verified that you're a New York Times employee. So therefore, you can log in to those services via that. Investigative reporters and editors, a membership organization. Membership organizations, they struggle with this sort of thing right now. We are approached all the time by membership organizations who want to give their members some sort of preferential treatment, some sort of benefit. They want into Document Cloud. They want to say, hey, you become a member with us, and then you could get some sort of special access to Document Cloud. Right now, that's a very manual process. When somebody comes and applies, and they say, yeah, I'm a member of blah, 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 we have to then get on the phone or send an email and say, is this person an actual member? Yes, they are. It's a very manual, very analog process. Through PressPass, trivial. The platforms are doing more and more with journalists, giving journalists access to tools like CrowdTangle in the case of Facebook. In the case of Google, giving access to journalists, things like Flourish, but also access to their own tools. I can guarantee you the last organization on earth that wants to be in the business of deciding who is and isn't a journalist are the platforms. So also through a system like PressPass, we could do this for them. For a journalist, it might look a little like this. This obviously is very poorly designed, but you get the idea. You might log into PressPass and have a sort of a dashboard to solve that discovery problem. You might be looking for, hey, I need to know more about how to do infographics. I need a tool to do infographics and interactives. You might never have heard of Flourish, but if Flourish is part of the network, it might be surfaced through a system like this. You might be able to say things like, I would like to know anytime there's a training related to data journalism within 5 miles of where I am, and we could ping you with that information. You can see how once you have this network in place, getting journalists and resources to one another becomes a lot easier. This actually exists in the world, by the way. There's a system very much like this. I'm not making all this up out of whole cloth. It's called ORCID. In the academic world, there's a great, it's super important to know whether an author of a journal article is who he or she says they are, and to be able to know whether those people have been cited in other academic articles. So ORCID has been in existence for a long time. It does many of the same kinds of things that I'm talking about. So there are models for this in the world. Here are some of the other ways you might take PressPass and use it. Training. You might offer discounts and offers to different kinds of services and third-party services. Skills sharing. Creating environments where journalists can help one another. Where journalists can share their skills with one another outside of events, maybe even like this one, or in collaboration with an event like this one. Events like this one. You know, I don't know how many conferences I go to every year, but every one of them has a different system for getting people into the room, for registration, for all that. Those are the kinds of services, those third-party services that we can connect together once we have a network like this in place. Internships, fellowships, on and on and on, different kinds of ways that journalists might be able to help themselves. One area that I want to focus on in particular, though, is diversity in hiring. We talk a lot, particularly in the US, about the lack of diversity in newsrooms. It's a significant problem that is totally solvable, but we don't actually solve, unfortunately. Using a network like this, you could build a system that would allow you to do recruiting and targeting and find candidates and create a far more diverse candidate pool. This is one way to do that is by using a blind audition system. There's a lot of platforms out there doing this, particularly in the tech world. We should bring that into the newsroom where people are given a test. They're given an ability, a test, you know, edit this story. And it's not even revealed until the candidate is brought into the interview. Their gender, their ethnicity isn't even part of the discussion. Yes, of course we have to talk about fake news and synthetic media. One thing you can do once you have a unique ID for you, the journalist, is you could digitally sign your content. This is right now, this is a little speculative and forward-looking. But if we think fake news is a problem, fake content could be an even bigger problem. And the platforms are really worried about this. So publishers might want ways in the very near future to say, this content was written by this person, and we know that because this ID is attached to this piece of content. It was published on this day. And here's a checksum that will tell you that this content hasn't been manipulated or changed or altered since publication. One thing you should know, this has to be default to privacy by design. We're going to be creating a very large data set with a lot of personal information in it, and that information has to be held, and it has to be held in a way that is not revealing it to the world unless the person wants it revealed. You would control your data. It would not be, again, we're not creating a global database of every journalist on the planet. Collaboration is another space. Margaret Sullivan, Jeff mentioned her piece yesterday. Margaret Sullivan wrote about the need to be more collaborative, and I think she's right. And right now, we don't have any tools for that, and that's why I talk about the plumbing. PressPass is the plumbing that can bring that together and make those collaborative environments happen. And finally, I think this is something that we need to do for ourselves. We can't wait for the platforms to do this for us. We can't wait for the Googles of the world to do this for us. we need to sit down and say, we as an organization, we as journalists need to start banding together and do this for ourselves. So Press Pass, to be super clear about this, will be an NGO. It will be governed as an NGO. It will not seek profit, it will seek sustainability, and it will have one mission, and that is to improve journalism. If you're interested, I'd love to hear from you. That's my contact information, and thank you very much.